And so I think when you look at it through a macro lens, be it fitness, be it retail, whatever it is, I think really a focus around how we're making people feel, whether it's digitally or physically, is something we all really need to get back to.
Welcome back to the Fitt Insider Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Veneri. Today I'm joined by Julie Rice and Elizabeth Cutler, the co-founders of Peoplehood. In this episode, we talk about the team's experience starting and scaling SoulCycle. We learn how the concept of communal wellness was born out of boutique fitness. Plus, we talk about Peoplehood's approach to fostering connection and strengthening relationships. Let's get into it. The Fitt Insider Podcast is brought to you by Jack Taylor, our exclusive PR partner. More than just PR, they're creative storytellers and brand builders who actually understand the health and wellness industry. Learn more and get in touch at jacktaylorpr.com. Julie, Elizabeth, thanks so much for joining us today. Welcome to Fitt Insider.
It's so great to be with you, Joe. Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. This is, super exciting for me, and I think a conversation a lot of the audience will enjoy. Introduction wise, typically I'll say like, hey, why don't you introduce yourselves? Tell us about what you've been working on, things like that. But I think the majority of the audience will be familiar with SoulCycle and the work you did there. Now going into kind of a new endeavor where we chatted a little offline and thinking about creating an entirely new category kind of once again with Peoplehood. Whatever type of kind of introduction you'd like to give to get us there, that starting point, but basically introduce Peoplehood and yeah, we'll use that as a kind of launch pad to the rest of the conversation.
Elizabeth, you ready? You ready to introduce Peoplehood? Why don't you go ahead?
I would love to. Thank you, Julie. Joe, thanks again. It's so cool to be with you. We're such big fans. Yes. So Peoplehood is a 60-minute experience that is based around active listening and connected conversation. It's led by a facilitator that holds space for other people, and the gathers, as we call them, hold up to 20 people. And it was really born out of an experience, many experiences actually, that we had at SoulCycle. In particular, Julie and I had a coach that we worked with early on that helped us really learn how to communicate with one another so that we could get each other, even if we weren't agreeing on whatever our situation was. And, Julie always talks about, and I think it's really true, that we get into business relationship, we just expect them to work out. We get married, we just expect it to work out. We have a kid, we just expect it to work out. We expect to know how to do these things instinctively and intuitively. And the truth is, like anything, like fitness, relational fitness requires practice. And that was something that we started to work on very early on at SoulCycle, as part of really understanding what it means to be in the hospitality business. And also because we just cared about our riders and we cared about the people who worked with us. And we wanted to make sure that we were showing up for them in the way they needed to be shown up for. And as a result of that, Peoplehood was really born. So what we have right now is a location on 17th Street in New York City, which is a physical location. You'll walk in there and you'll see merch, of course, because Julie has an inner muse that is a 15-year-old sneakerhead, and she makes the best sweatshirts of anybody I've ever met in my life. It's like crazy. I don't even like sweatshirts, and I love her sweatshirts. It's funny. And people are always stealing my sweatshirts, so I know they're good. Yes, please. And we have space here where we're doing gathers pretty much on the hour. And then we've also built a platform that came out of 4 years of research on Peoplehood that just launched last week. That is a digital platform, a video platform, so that you can have an end-to-end experience of the gathers online. And it's been so interesting to build this product pre-COVID, during COVID, and now post-COVID. So many learnings and so much to share.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting as you're talking about that. It is elements of the boutique fitness experience, what everybody talks about as community and tribe and coming together, and that experience that you can really only get when you're in a studio or a gym, like sweating alongside somebody, the lights are low, in some cases the candles are lit, right? And you have this kind of energy and vibe. And I think people searching for that in various aspects of their life, like how do we come together in a more meaningful way and talk about things that we don't necessarily get to talk about anywhere else. Elizabeth, you talk about it being kind of an evolution in some ways, but was it even kind of back in the day thinking like, oh, maybe this is something unto itself, even when it, as part of like the SoulCycle fitness experience?
Well, it's so interesting because obviously when we started SoulCycle, let me take you back. There was no boutique fitness in New York City at all. I like to frame it by saying there was no Lululemon in New York City at all. I mean, we really started SoulCycle in a moment where this concept of fitness as lifestyle is not something that the East Coast had embraced at all. And so, we would sit in the studio trying to explain to people why they would come and pay, a la carte for an offering that was already offered at their gym. And I think at the time, to your point, what we were unable to articulate were all of the things that you just talked about. This is a place that's going to provide you community. It's going to provide you connection to yourself. It's going to provide you connection to other people. I think all along, just, they say businesses are a real, they really come out as a part of, it's the DNA of a founder a lot of times that, is what permeates the business. And I think for Elizabeth and I, so much of our DNA is in community building, is in, fostering connection. And I think actually, although in the very beginning, I would love to say that we thought, that was the real product that we were creating. But I think pretty quickly early on, we had a moment where we opened our first studio on the West Coast, and we had opened quite a few in New York. It was the 1-year anniversary of West Hollywood, and Elizabeth and I were in the lobby of that studio when we had just taken a ride with the riders out there. We left the class and something happened to us. And it was sort of an aha moment, which was riders were coming up to us and they were saying, I've been riding here for a year and, my jeans fit better and my doctor's happy with me, but that's not what really happened. Let me tell you about how this has been great for my relationship with my husband, or I come here with my teenager, or I've made new friends, or I had the inner strength to quit a job. And I think pretty quickly we began to understand that what was happening in those rooms was really about the support, the unconditional support that people were giving to each other, and sort of the permission that people were giving to themselves. And, you know, we really ultimately began to build in to the business of SoulCycle ways to scale that connection, right? We not only thought about how are we going to scale a studio, how are we going to scale cleanliness standards, how are we going to scale rides and riders, but really how do you scale human connection, which was a very interesting thing to think about. And what Elizabeth said is really right. And it's funny, I told you before, like, I'm a real fan of your newsletter. And I do think that what's fascinating when you read through Fit Insider is you kind of get a 360 picture, right, of how all of the pieces fit together. And today, which looks so different than 2005, but you can begin to really understand how working out without mental health, without thinking about your diet, and so for us, as we began to think about what came out of SoulCycle, Elizabeth and I really create products that we want to use in the world. And I think that we leaving SoulCycle and then hitting a global pandemic and having teenagers that bring their phones to the dinner table, it became very apparent to us that intentional connection was a thing. It's something that we have forgotten how to do. We used to just sit around dinner tables and talk to each other. Now we bring our phones, right? So unfortunately, we need to reteach people how to do something that should be pretty innately understandable. And so Peoplehood was really born from kind of the understanding of what made SoulCycle special and what we wanted to see in the world and bridging that. And so it's been a really interesting journey. We started this before COVID, throw in a global pandemic. I think I was, again, reading your newsletter about kind of depression rates, loneliness epidemic, what's going on with teenagers. And so it feels like, Peoplehood is really meant for the world right now. It's been a really interesting time to create this.
Yeah, as you're talking about it, there's so many aspects of it, from building brand to not only building community, but you kind of phrased it as like scaling this human interaction and all these elements that, as you look at them in isolation, it's kind of like, how do we do this? What does it mean? What would it be like to, and I'm sure in some ways, this is what you're thinking through as you're creating this, like, the idea of coming together and authentically, intentionally sharing and communicating in a world where it's never been easier to communicate. There's never been more mechanisms to communicate, but somehow we like can't get it right. It's obviously not working, like you said, just given the rates of loneliness, depression. As you're thinking about what this looks like, obviously there's, fitness, which is one experience. There's therapy, there's, support groups for all different types of, what may be happening in your life. Did you draw on those? Or I guess better question, what did you draw on as you're thinking about, hey, how do we bring this to life? Also, obviously knowing the influence that something like SoulCycle had.
Look, I think as sort of the headline that is that we hope that relationships can become just as prioritized as daily fitness. And that when we did the research that we did, we spent many years actually interviewing people about their work on connection, whether it was based on science, whether it was based on decades of relationship therapy work. You have it. There's actually quite a bit of research that was accessible to us in these last 4 years. And ironically, now that we've launched, there's some even more potent research that's come out about longevity and the quality of relationships and how that's such a key indicator to a healthy life, or how you have maintained these relationships and if you're optimistic. And really, for us, what we found was that there was one through line through all of the conversations that we were having across the board and through different disciplines. And that was how critical it is to actively listen. And yet, that is not something that we're ever really taught. And in fact, the way that dialogues really works in our culture is that as soon as someone starts talking, you have this pressure to figure out, oh my God, what am I going to say? How am I going to fix this? What's going to come next? And so to really be in the moment and actually sink into not only listening with your ears, but with your eyes, even with your whole body, is something that we do in these rooms. And it has such a profound effect on not only ourselves, but the person with whom we're listening. That I, as Julie said, we build things for ourselves. And what we're finding is that people enter the room feeling one way and they leave the room feeling, for lack of a better term, higher. And we think that that's like a lead indicator for what people can get out of it from an initial experience. But then you start to hear these stories about, as Julie said, what's happening at dinner tables or what's happening in the office or what's happening in your most important relationships, and how you are taking a beat before reacting to something, or how you're actually able to suspend your own beliefs about a situation in order to just listen to another person. You don't have to change your mind. You don't have to do something different, but to just suspend your own personal narrative about something in order to hear another human being. Those kinds of muscle, it's a muscle. It's something that needs to be practiced in order to become proficient at it. And I have a lot of work to do. We've been working on this for a while. So we just see that there's a lot to do around creating this kind of peer-to-peer structure that incorporates things like music and breath work and guided prompts so that you can feel empowered to share freely and listen deeply and feel more connected to yourself and your community.
Hey everyone, we'll get you back to the show in just a second. But first, I wanted to tell you about our exclusive PR partner, Jack Taylor. Honestly, this one's a no-brainer. We've known the Jack Taylor team for years. They work with some of the most innovative health and wellness companies. We're talking Whoop, Athletic Greens, Hyperice, and many more. Jack Taylor has an extensive industry network, knows how to work with high-growth companies, and really invests in building long-term relationships. I know this firsthand because they're Fit Insider's PR agency, so I can confidently recommend them, and I do all the time. From startups to more established brands, they go beyond pushing product to help companies truly thrive. If you want to learn more, head to jacktaylorpr.com and tell them Fit Insider sent you. Now, back to the show. Yeah, I think that's huge. And I think even getting to this place I often think about, even from a mental health standpoint, you've had the evolution to mental fitness, you've had this relationship wellness, all the different avenues, not to mention, various digital mental health platforms, all really trying to solve various aspects of what we're talking about, which is like something's very clearly wrong. We, across society, how we feel, how we interact with others, how we interact with, even in our own heads. So making sense of this, obviously the kind of shift to destigmatize mental health and just talking about it and making it okay to seek help and treatment and confide in others. But also part of it is like building brand around, like, I don't know if it's making it cool, not just making it acceptable, but making it cool. And I think you have something like a meditation app like Calm, right? They kind of talked about like, how do we make this cool? Obviously what you all are talking about is different in terms of both the experience, the medium, the product, all of those things. But how much kind of thought went into that aspect of it, of, hey, how do we bring what we know, this kind of secret sauce, the magic, not only of community, but brand, into this overarching kind of message to really build something that people will want to be a part of?
Look, we are brand junkies. I mean, if we're two things, we're brand junkies and community junkies, and so I would say we're equal parts both. I think that even part of the success of SoulCycle, I remember when we started SoulCycle, people were saying we weren't cycling instructors. People had a lot to say about that for sure. But I think that the fact that we were able to come at that business with a different lens, with really a brand focused lens, Elizabeth and I like to say we always thought of SoulCycle as a gateway drug, right? We didn't build SoulCycle for people that were triathletes or Olympians or people that were already, running marathons. For us, once again, we built something that we wanted to use. We wanted to build fitness that we would enjoy, right? Something where you could find joy in your body in a reasonable amount of time. That's what we built. And it's funny because in our first SoulCycle studio, which was located right by Central Park, I remember we would go out there to hand out flyers to all the cyclists, that were doing the loop around Central Park. And those were the last people that wanted to come indoors. They fancied themselves real athletes, and what we were creating, had no appeal for them, at least in the first few years. But ironically, what we created really was, look, a lot of athletes wound up using the product. I mean, we had famous athletes that came, we had, amateur athletes that came, and ultimately it became something for everybody. But really, in the beginning, our goal was to create something that was just what you said, cool. We looked at retail experiences. We looked, our first studio we modeled after the White Cube Art Gallery. We really looked to other sources of inspiration and zeitgeist and pop culture to kind of wrap this product in something that made it feel like something people wanted to do, right? That made them feel cool or like this was the thing. And, there's no shame in that. I mean, we ultimately got people to do something healthy by creating a cool brand around it. And I think it's the same thing with Peoplehood, right? If you come check out our spot on 17th Street, it's like we do have cool merch and hoodies, and we've got a bar where you can get a latte. If you come and bring your partner, you can have a glass of wine before. If you look at the website, we intentionally designed it. It feels more editorial than kind of, corporate medical brief. And it's all for those reasons, because the truth is, our goal, once again, we are not your therapist. We are not therapy. We say right up front, that's not what we are providing. We are creating social and relational health. We are not in the mental health business. But all of that being said, right, we hope to be a gateway drug for people that might not normally go and be able to use their voice and talk about their feelings. We play cool music. The guides that you're going to see in front of the room are aspirational. They are great storytellers. They're the kind of people you want to hang out with afterward. They are a different version of SoulCycle instructors, really, right? And it's fantastic because we're really giving this like a new look to what it is like to be in high quality human relationships with yourself and other people. And so what we're hoping is that people that this type of thing might not have appealed to will ultimately become great sharers, great listeners, great husbands, great wives, great children, great colleagues, great partners, right? And And we really do believe that we can do that, and that brand can really help us. And so, yeah, all the things, like we're like deep in the brand and we're having a lot of fun with it. And it turns out there's like a lot of fun to have around a people brand.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear you say that and walk through the pieces of it, and also just be so direct in saying, like, this is what it is. We're trying to build a company that has to convince people to come in. And yes, the thing that we're doing is trying to maybe hopefully lead them down a better path for better habits, better relationships, better communication. And it's interesting to hear you say at the outset of SoulCycle, like, getting criticism for not being cycling instructors or maybe not being athletes or what have you. I'm sure if it's
Oh
not
no, we're
already that.
definitely not athletes. It's funny. A lot of times Elizabeth and I will show up for a meeting and people expected something totally different than what actually shows up, right? I always feel like people are like, oh, I want to go exercise with you. And then when I show up in my tights ready to do exercise, they're shocked that I'm not going to be the best person in the class. And let me tell you, I am not by a lot.
You're just out there trying to get better like everybody
Just
else.
trying to get through it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But even in this case, I'm sure if it hasn't happened yet, like, there will be a similar type of criticism with like how you're going about it or who the guides are or even the concept in general. Like, what do you say to that? How do you kind of navigate the criticism of like whatever path you want to go down, even though you say it's not therapy, it's not mental health? Like, hey, are you just trying to put a different kind of package on mental health? Or are you trying to do X, Y, or Z? How do you navigate that kind of from the founder perspective?
Listen, that I'm really glad that you brought that up actually, because the reason why we are doing this is because this is a low stakes way to engage in something that is a peer to peer structure, right? Like, even if we turn the lights on, okay, let's just like lens out for a second about what kind of crisis is happening right now. And even if we turned every single person who wanted to be a therapist into a therapist magically overnight, we still would not have enough to be able to serve the communities that we need to serve. So the truth is, Julie and I have always, and anytime we've had the opportunity to talk to someone, people would ask us about other fitness brands. Please go work out. Whatever you need to do to make yourself feel better, to find the health that you want to have, like, please go do that. We're not saying that this is the only answer. We're saying that this is part of the equation and that we need to, as a culture, as a grouping of humans, be there for one another in a way that is a peer to peer environment where we can just show up. That is all you have to do. All you have to do is show up, and we will take you through an hour where we promise that you will feel better when you leave than when you came in. And why is that? It's because it's like when people walk into SoulCycle class, right? It's like you're without your phone for an hour, you've moved your body, all those things. This in some ways has a lot of that shared pattern matching and DNA. If you just take an hour to show up at Peoplehood, you'll breathe, you'll listen to music, you'll share thoughts that maybe you didn't even know were that important to you. You get to hear yourself think without the distraction of your phone. Or I don't know about you, but I am super addicted to my phone. I am on that thing. I am so distracted by it. And when I can just put it away for an hour and be present with other people, practice listening, be forthcoming about what's really on my mind, whether it is as light as what I had for breakfast or as deep as like I'm very proud of my daughter because she won Battle of the Bands last night, or something that's like a little bit more pertinent to a human experience. You know, we experience grief, we experience loss, we experience elation, we experience all of these things. COVID really exemplified that we think we're alone and we're not. So when you show up in these rooms, you start to see yourself in other people and you realize, I mean, at least I do. I think I am the only person feeling these things, and then I see other people. It's such a relief, honestly, just in a very basic way, to understand that other people are feeling a sense of isolation or other people are feeling fear or anxiety or whatever is on the menu of humanness that day. And you can start to understand, like, it's not just me. And I think there's something super potent about that kind of connection that you feel. And what we've noticed is that folks are coming away with a dose of humanity. And so I just think, like, look, if we're going to do this huge, massive social experiment around social media, let's do another huge, massive social experiment about what it means to be showing up for each other for an hour in small groups and just see what happens.
Yeah, I think that's well said. Go ahead, Julie.
No, I was just going to say, like, we love therapy. We think everyone should also have a therapist. We are not telling anyone to leave their therapist. It's just when you look at, like, you were talking before sort of about what the landscape of wellness looks like. And so when you look at what this 360 picture of wellness looks like, it's like you have exercise, you have nutrition, you have sleep, you have mental health. And then we actually would put ourselves in a totally separate column, which is sort of social relational health. And ironically, if you look at, all of the studies that have been done, it's actually that piece that, keeps us the physically healthiest, it keeps us the mentally healthiest. And yet, we really don't spend very much time thinking about how we nurture that part. But we are absolutely categorizing this as social health.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's one thing, and a lot of similar conversations I go back and forth on, which is, on one hand, it's amazing that all these different innovative approaches, brands, communities, technologies exist. And on the other hand, it's like, oh man, it's the fact that we've got to the place where we need that solution is kind of, it kind of gives me pause, right? That just think, however many years ago, that's what a community, as in, your neighborhood, your street, your family, that's what it was, because that's what you were doing. You were spending time with those people. You were sharing these types of stories. You were having authentic and meaningful, intentional conversations. Now we have arrived at a place where we kind of have to like undo in some ways, whether it's through social media, technology, what have you, to create space for these types of interactions, create this pillar around social wellness and these experience relationship wellness. But that's where we are. So you think about then, Elizabeth, to your point, like, let's figure out what to do now that we have arrived at this place where we can't just let the status quo be like where we stop. Yeah, I guess that's just a little tangent on like trying to process it and think about like, okay, we're here now. What do we do? Is this the ideal situation? No, probably not. but we've done this and we've arrived at this place, so we have to figure out how to, you know, live better with ourselves, with other people, and what have you. As you think about then, obviously having a location starting in New York, thinking about, with SoulCycle was something, and at various points in time, like, oh, it's just for people on the coast and it's for a certain demographic. And now, of course, boutique fitness has expanded not only to however you categorize them, tier 2, 3, whatever cities all over the place, all over the world. How do you think about where you open, how you open, who it's for, and those sorts of things?
Look, I think we're starting here because we're based in New York and we want to have a home. Because we first and foremost, our DNA is physical creation. We're physical creators. But because of COVID, we really leaned into what does it mean to feel connected on a digital platform. And to be perfectly honest with you, and I think a lot of people may feel this way, I personally found, so we have built a digital platform that's video conferencing, so kind of end to end, and it feels really good. And there's a certain intimacy that comes from seeing somebody's face in a box online and going through the arc of the experience of the gather. What I found was just I felt so much closer to these random people that I was seeing on Peoplehood and really feeling like, wow, this is so personally meaningful to me. I don't even know if I can go in person. Like I think I just want to only do it online. And I have to admit, like I had a fair amount of trepidation before coming in person. And now that I'm doing it in person, I'm really feeling also the benefit from that. So look, I think for us, our main goal is to meet people where they are. And so if people are in a remote place that could be a long time before we open, if ever, a Peoplehood there, then this is great because they can participate in the community. And if you are in Chelsea, in New York City, and you want to walk around the corner and come sit with us, you're totally able to do that. But I think that that's really our strategy is to meet people where they are. And to that end, to answer the physical aspect of the question, it does make sense for us to kind of plant flags in bigger cities where people are asking for it. And we're certainly excited to do that. We obviously have plenty of experience in doing that, but we just really want to see what people need and try to be of service. And then just in terms of accessibility, I mean, the reality is like, I don't know. I mean, I went to the movies the other night and it was $27 to see a movie just for me. And so what we're finding is that right now you can do 3 gathers for $55. That seems like a lot of really good value, and especially given how you feel after you come out of it and developing that kind of practice that is such an extraordinary antidote really to the doom scrolling that I would be doing if I weren't doing a gather. There's something very powerful about just dedicating that time and allowing the unfolding of that experience to happen throughout the week. And so, look, we're starting here. And what we hope is to be able to share this with as many people as we can and to be able to innovate along the way. But for now, it does seem like we've created an opportunity for this to be as accessible as we can.
Yeah, the technology piece certainly does that. Do you have, it might be too early at this point, but even in terms of maybe like a split between physical and digital, is there like an ideal kind of mix that you're targeting? Do you anticipate that it will be more digital than physical, but also knowing that physical is important because of what that experience is like, or haven't gotten that far yet?
It's 2023. And so, just looking at kind of the way people are using products in the world. I mean, you're the biggest student of this that there is, right? It's like if you were gonna call it today, you would say that people who used to go to use, studio fitness 5 times a week, they now go once or twice a week, and then they use their home equipment. And so I think we're thinking about it this time differently. We would build Peloton probably before SoulCycle. And so we're thinking that probably, like Elizabeth said, it's probably flagships in markets that can have them and digital scale. And so that's really the way that we're looking at it this time around. And I think if you look at sort of any consumer business right now, from retail on down, that's really what it looks like. It's really consumers want a place to touch things, see them, experience it, but they also want to be in their homes a lot. And so we've got to, like Elizabeth said, meet them where they are.
Absolutely. It makes sense. Changing gears a little bit, this was something I was very curious about and wanted to get your thoughts on, which is getting back in the founder seat again, saying we're going to set out to build this thing, and however big that vision is now, but basically committing to this journey after already doing it and knowing that, it's not easy and it takes time, effort, sacrifice to do it. What were those conversations like with each other, with yourself, to say like, yes, this is the idea, this is the thing, we're ready to do it, and like we're setting out down this path again?
I think that Julie and I share the thought that, at least in our flavor of entrepreneurship, it is as much a calling as anything else. And this was just an idea that wouldn't be quiet. It was something that was planted in both of us at SoulCycle and continued to kind of grow, while continue to grow all the time when we were there. And once that journey ended, which, was a dagger through both of our collective hearts, even though, it was time, like it was so hard to make that transition, we really reflected on what we saw that we liked, that worked there. It's not easy being a second time founder. We could talk a long time about that if you want to. There's a lot of things going on. But I think that, at least for me, I have so much conviction that if people just show up for this, that it can really have a huge impact on how they operate as a human. It's worth it. I really want to see this get born. I'm not getting another job after this. Like, this is it for me personally. Like, I just really want to see this happen in the world. Why are you laughing? Why? Because you think I'm not employable after this?
You're not employable before this, but
well, that's true. That's 100% accurate.
I always say Elizabeth is literally the best entrepreneur in the world. She is nobody's employee. I'm only laughing.
I could try. I could totally try.
We might wake up when we're 70 and give it one more crack. You have no idea what
Oh
we
my
might come up with
God.
then.
Yeah, if we pay close attention to Joe's longevity tips, we might have you have really long life genes, so it's totally possible. How old was your grandmother when she died? Like 106 or 8 or something?
108, 108. She got
This is what I'm saying. Julie's
a
gonna
letter
be
from the
Julie's up.
Obama administration congratulating her.
Yeah,
Um, yeah,
Julie will be
no,
around
listen,
forever.
I agree. It's I think what you said really resonates with me, Elizabeth. It was like, I don't think we've had plenty of opportunities and other ideas that, would have been easier and financially more viable. I really don't think we were just in it to start another company. This was really something that we both really believe in. There's the added bonus of having a partner that you love working with and collaborating with every day. And so I think for us, at least for me, being able to work together again was a real draw. I do think being a second time founder is very hard. I actually think it's much harder than being a first time entrepreneur because you know what it's supposed to look like. You understand words like scale. You understand what you're playing for. And I think that I fluctuate back and forth between crisis of confidence. Are we creating the right thing? Are we putting it out into the world in the right way? There's definitely a different standard that you hold yourself to, I think. And then also, I think there's something about not seeing it so big, really sitting at your desk and just trying to think about like, how will one person feel when they leave the experience? Because when you create for one person, you really can imagine what that would be like. And I think that's really the only way to create. When you start thinking about it so big, you lose the plot. That's hard. Like you sort of have to continue to like bring yourself back to like, what does the one person feel like? How does the one person feel important? How does one person feel seen? That's definitely one of the things that's been tricky for us this time.
Yeah, especially when you have already had the experience of doing it at scale and doing it, not, yes, of course, even at that time, you're still trying to think about what is that in studio experience and making sure that every single person in there feels the way that you described, but also knowing what type of impact you have. Yeah, it's something. And in my case, working with my brother, I don't really have a choice. You said, working together again, it feels like we are forever linked in that journey. But it's certainly exciting to think about having another opportunity to do something that's potentially category defining and with all the elements that are, so tangible, especially in the world as it exists today, software or apps or digital this or that. Yes, it's all very compelling and has huge scale and reach and implications, but doing something that people show up to and come in person and have those aspects, community and creating a category, I think, yeah, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm sure things like that, it was like, oh yeah, this feels like the type of thing that if we're going to do it, it's going to be something like this.
Yeah, I think so. It's funny. We had a fantastic launch party last week, and we, did all the press and all the things, and all of our friends came, and it was like a fantastic night, and I remember, the next day I got all the texts from my friends and my family saying, how are you feeling about it? It's so exciting. And said that, are you excited? And my answer to everybody was, if I hadn't done this once before, I would be really excited. But now I know we've cleaned up the party, and now it's time to go to work and get people to actually come to this. So the truth is, am I excited? No, I was more excited before we had the party.
Yeah.
No, you're excited. I know, guys. I've heard that in your voice all day. There's been some good stuff happening.
You mentioned there's people at the office, construction going on, you're getting all those things going and right back in the thick of it, trying to think about, here we go. Like like you said, we got to get people in the door.
Yeah, I mean, it's so true. I mean, at least for myself, like what I'm finding in those rooms is really solving for like a hunger that I personally have been experiencing post pandemic. It's really interesting to have launched this and now start, to Julie's point, of the real work. What's also happening are the real conversations that are coming out as a result of us kind of like planting a flag, and to hear from people from whom I would never think that I would be having any kind of call it deep conversation with, to really hear what is actually going on for them and how meaningful it is for them to have access to the structure and the scaffolding of this kind of experience, that they almost feel like they're a little bit better equipped to manage their humanity as a result of spending an hour. I mean, at least for me, that makes me want to get up in the morning and keep on keeping on. And it's kind of fun to, in some ways, in many ways, actually, to kind of like look at the daily wrap ups and be like, okay, 30 more people, 30 more people, 30 more people.
Yeah, it's exciting. Changing gears as we get you out of here. I promise we'll wrap it up here with a couple more questions. This one may be a little bit selfish kind of curiosity, but just given your experience in the fitness space, obviously the last couple years have been a roller coaster to say the least. Do you think about the kind of current state of fitness, what the kind of journey has been from the boutique boom of like the early 2000s to seeing the explosion of the Pelotons, right? The at-home fitness, and now the industry finding its footing again, some brands better than others. Yeah, kind of open-ended there, but curious if you still maintain that interest and opinion about like, hey, what's happening and maybe where it goes from here.
Well, I can just say for myself, we have a love of fitness. We're inspired by people who are doing, I mean, there's so many people. It has really attracted talent. And that's something that Julie can speak to better than anybody that I know. But it really has attracted talent to be able to inspire so many people. And I know that it's gone through bumps, but you know what the thing is? Like, it's here to stay. It is so important for people to take care of their physical health. We know it, we do it. We're all committed to it because we want to live healthier, better lives. I mean, I used to joke that like my parents' version of working out was smoking and drinking. I mean, we've come a long way from that. And it's kind of great that we have. So, in any market like that, some people are going to rise to the top and some people aren't going to make it. They're going to have to pivot. But I think that, the reality is like, in some ways, everybody's just got to rise to the occasion. I mean, that's what life is, period. So, I don't have much more clarity on what's happening in the boutique fitness world than that, but I'm just really really happy that there are so many talented people just trying to bring health and like genuine wellness to large and small groups of people of different ages and backgrounds.
Julie's nodding. Not much to add to it beyond that, right?
I think the world is still figuring out who it wants to be in general. I don't think I'm not sure that consumer behavior has had a complete shakeout yet. It feels like every 3 months, just when you think you know what behavior is going to be, I'm a visual learner, so I mark it kind of by, I was, driving up one of the avenues the other day, and all of a sudden, like I'm noticing new retail in the stores I'm noticing new storefronts coming up for the first time, and that has me thinking like, oh, okay, well that means we're going to start to have another turn of people coming back. I traveled over Christmas and was in London for a couple of days, and like I've never seen a city so packed. So clearly people are experience seeking again. And yet, we also know that, people are using digital products too. It's all just to say that I don't think that we can absolutely sort of say what the new consumer behavior is yet. I think people are still finding their way back to the world. What I do think is that people want to be treated well. People want products that have hospitality and customer service. I think the deeper we get into taking human beings and also thinking about human beings' feelings, whether we're creating digital product or physical product, the further we get away from retaining the customers that are so hard to acquire. And so I think when you look at it through a macro lens, be it fitness, be it retail, whatever it is, I think really a focus around how we're making people feel, whether it's digitally or physically, is something that we all really need to get back to, because I can really name very few brands that I am super loyal to right now, that I feel super connected to, that I feel like know me at all, whether it's logging into something and getting some confetti or walking through a front door of something and somebody knowing my name. Those things matter to consumers, and it's time to really find our way back there.
I think that's really well said. I appreciate you taking that little tangent with me to zoom out to the broader space. But I think, yeah, it will continue to play out. And that's definitely lacking, and thus a huge opportunity for people who can fill that void. Yeah, last question, less of a question, more maybe a call to action as we get you out of here. I'm sure people are super interested. What's the best place to follow along, try out Peoplehood, learn more? Where would you point them?
Well, you can try along. You can come sign up for a gather at peoplehood.com. We are running 5 gathers a day right now digitally, and you can come visit us in New York City in our first physical location at 109 West 17th Street. We'll give you a coffee if you walk in. And Elizabeth, what else can you say?
We're also on Instagram at peoplehood_, and we have a really fun Instagram. And we just would love to see you. So if you want to stop by, come see us. And if you want to DM us or be in contact with us, we're just here to start the conversation. We're really focused on what it means to feel connected. And so we don't care if we see you in person or if we see you in another way. We just want to stay in touch.
Fantastic. Yeah, we'll get all that, tell folks where to go in the show notes. Super grateful that you were both able to join us here today. Really excited to share this conversation. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for having us. Nice to see you.
It's so nice to see you. Thank you again.
One more thing before you head out. Help us spread the word. Take a minute to rate and review the podcast, subscribe to the YouTube channel, or share this episode with a friend. And if you like conversations like this, you'll love the Fitt Insider newsletter. We send it every Tuesday. The link is in the description. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you back here next week.